Thank you for having me here. Thank you for organizing this. So what I'm going to talk about today is my book. Things I think it fits into the theme today very well. And let me share a screen. I have prepared a little slide, little few slides right here. Okay, let's see. Can you hear me all right, everybody? Yeah, okay. So let's go back to the first slide. So as you can see from the cover of this book on the left side, this book covers the lives and political activism of five figures. It explores their global interactions, particularly their passage across the murky and sometimes treacherous trans-Pacific ideological and political landscapes. Okay, so I think for the audiences here and the three famous 20th century African American figures, we don't need introduction, right? W.E.B. Du Bois, mentioned many times here, Paul and Lexington Hughes. And so the other two figures here, Liu Liangmo, Liu Liangmo and Si Lanchen, they were once well known, but since had been assigned to the dustbin of history before I rescued them. Okay, so who was Liu Liangmo? He was a talented musician, a prolific journalist, and also a Christian activist. So the brief introduction of him. Sylvia Si Lanchen was a pioneering Sino-Caribbean dancer choreographer who happened to be a daughter of Eugene Chen, a foreign minister of China in the 1920s. And also she was once upon a time a romantic partner of Lexington Hughes. Okay. So, and also if you look at this slide here, both Robeson and both Robeson and Paul Robeson uh, considered her the perfect union of Black and Chinese. Okay, so those some very brief ideas who are those figures covered in my book. Okay, so overall, solidarity of the colored world in their shared destiny of anti-racism and anti-colonialism, and bound these five figures together. Right? And so their political ties, as I illustrated in my book, was based on their profound emotional and intellectual understanding of the Sino-Afro kinship, cultural and racial kinship. And so, for instance, I copied a few quotes for you here from my book. And when Lexington Hughes made the epic trip to Shanghai in 1933, and in his autobiography, he wrote about the Chinese. And so for him, the Chinese were a very jolly people, as you can see from this slide here, much like colored folks at home. Right? And so his sentiment was echoed by Liu Liangmo when he traveled in the United States for a decade during the Second World War and to talk about China, the suffering of China to the United States. And so he found the same thing about the similarity between the Chinese and African Americans. Okay? And so their ideas, their feelings about their faith in the Sino-Afro cultural and racial kinship were shared by W.E.B. Du Bois. In his earlier writings, he talked about how he felt the Chinese were my physical cousins. Okay, so he further elaborated this idea in a poem he wrote in 1959. The title was I Sing to China, published in China Reconstructs. Okay, so this poem was actually dedicated to a Chinese intellectual and official, a writer whose name was Guo Moruo. Okay, and so in this poem, as you can see, and Du Bois romantically announced that sun which burned my father's ebony, rolled your limbs in gold, and made us both cousins to the stars. Okay, so therefore, these 5 figures enjoyed a general friendship based on racial solidarity. We talked a lot about here in this webinar already, and also shared anti-racism and anti-colonialism. And so they interacted with one another in different ways. At times, they collaborated and contributed to historical alliances. And at other times, as I mentioned, they fell in and out of love. Okay. And so here, due to limited time, I'm not going to go more in details, but I want to highlight among the many areas of collaboration between Liu Liangmo and Paul Robeson. So how do I move to the next slide? And yeah, here. And was their contribution to help to globalize the future national anthem for China, and called Qi Lai. Today, also back then, also in China, called March of Volunteers. Okay, and so I would like to share with you for a few seconds of Paul Robeson's version of this song before it became the national anthem for China today. So this is from an album Liu and Robeson made together with the Chinese laundry people from New York City's Chinatown. Okay.
This is a song born in the struggle of the brave Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
It begins, Qi Lai, arise, you who refuse to be bond slave, and ends, Chen Jing, march on. Qi Lai，不愿做奴隶的人们，把我们的血肉组成我们新的长城。中华民族到了最危险的时候，每个人得活着发出最好的号声。起来，起来，起来！我们万众一心，冒着敌人的炮火前进，冒着敌人的炮火前进，前进，前进。Arise, you who refuse to be bond slaves. Let's stand up and fight for liberty and true democracy. All our world is facing the change of the tyrant. Everyone who works for freedom is now crying. Arise, arise, arise. All of us with one heart, with the torch of freedom, march on, with the torch of freedom, march on, march on, march on and on.
Okay, I'll stop here. So, what are the major contributions of this book? What readers expect to take from this? I think Dennis already mentioned. Keith already mentioned. I feel this book reveals much earlier and widespread interactions between Chinese and leftist figures, more than the familiar story of the Black radicals and Maoist China. And beyond that, I think it breaks ground in other areas. For instance, when we think about Sino-American relations, default, scholarship, default, they treat, U.S. as default white. So I think my book breaks new path by foregrounding African Americans in this discourse. And by doing so, it allows us to reimagine Sino-American relations by decentralizing the story of Kissinger and Nixon, etc., and allows us to imagine Afro-Chinese history as centered to the global history, world history, and also focus on anti-racism, anti-colonialism, and popular movement, which are still very much relevant today. It's another thing. And also this study combines study of Black internationalism with the experience of Chinese and Chinese Americans with a trans-Pacific narrative. Okay, so actually there was one reader who recommends this book on social media and made such a comment. So let me read this. And he wrote, "What Du Bois, Robeson, and Hughes have in common? What if I told you that part of the answer was a deep engagement with China and Chinese Americans?" So I thought that was pretty well said. So that's the second point I'd like to make about the contribution of my book. And of course, this process also reveals and making and remaking of modern Chinese popular culture and politics through a global process. And it reveals and China's transnational entanglement, even in the era commonly perceived as China as isolated, disconnected. Okay, so to conclude, so I think the lives and careers of these 5 figures stand as powerful counters of the narratives that highlight alienation and racism. Okay, and ROI's Africa, raw China, as articulated by W.E.B. Du Bois and Leslie Hughes, respectively, match with the struggles of the nation that refers to China, and a nation within a nation that refers to African Americans. And so their promise and power would resonate beyond today. Okay, and that's all what I have to say today. Thank you very much.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.